This is a video on how not to sleep with 1,000 women. Basically, if you're a young man, how not to be a total and to keep your body count low. I'm going to examine why you might want to do that. I think a lot of the reasons aren't immediately obvious, and they're definitely not promoted by the media. Learn some lessons here the hard way myself that I hope to share so you can avoid some of those mistakes. Also, practically how to do it. Now, I'm aware there's two very different groups of people going to be watching this. There's one group of people who are like, I can't get a date on Tinder. I can't get a date. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Well, I totally get it. The dating market has been destroyed. If you don't have the confidence to talk to someone, if you don't have a situation where you're high status, if you're not tall, not good looking, this video probably isn't for you. If, however, you do what I did in my late 20s and early 30s and have sort of figured out, you don't need to be like super mega rich or like good looking like a model. You do need some combination of tall, physically attractive, charismatic, like social skills. Some kind of situation where you're high status, though again, you don't have to be like a millionaire or something, right? You just have to have some environment where you have some status. That's what I had in my particular work environment, different environments when I was younger. I learned the social skills through traveling, through talking to people. You don't have to be like pick-up master or anything, but learn how to talk to people. And work on your fitness just a little bit. You can be in that top 10% of men fairly easily. There's people like Home Math who have broken this down if you want a sort of analysis on YouTube. So for that group, people going, what the hell are you talking about? I get it. It's painful. You just want a date. I'm talking to the other group of people. So I'm talking to the young men who can get a date relatively easily, whether that be through talking to someone in nightclubs or in the street, whether that be through the apps. They've got some good photos, they're able to get matches, they've worked that out. Those young men, this is you're subject to a level of temptation that just didn't exist before for normal guys in human history. The Genghis Khans and people like that maybe, but for the average dude, let's take my dad, right? He grew up in the 60s in a small town in England called Shrewsbury. And he was considered a bit of a cad, a bit of an alley cat, I think his mum used to call him. And what that meant is he probably had probably less than 10 girlfriends before he met my mum, right? And he got married relatively young, had kids and settled down, which is what people did then. Now, people settle down way later. They can travel. A lot of my dating was done in the United States, Brazil, Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe. People spoke English. So if my dad had managed to get to Poland, they wouldn't have spoke English back in the day. And the apps just mean there's a sort of scalability. So the way the internet and apps work is that if you make it into that top 10%, all of a sudden, boom. I remember in Moscow, I used to do a lot of dating there before the war, and I had 1,000 matches, and most of them were like hot, professional Russian women. And I was like, this is not a situation my dad ever found himself in. Now, you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Fill your boots, have a great time. And I totally get that. That's what mainstream culture suggests, isn't it? That sort of sex is just like sport. It's fun as long as it's consent orientated. Go for it. And I think there's something in that. I get it. In my experience, though, that will not make you happy. In fact, makes people pretty miserable. And there's some serious reasons I want to outline now why it's really not a good idea. Really, really genuinely catastrophic, I would say, actually, as an idea. For most people, if you're very young, if you've never been there, I get it. It's a very strong natural urge. However, in this sort of weird context we're in, it goes wrong. It's a bit like we have a natural urge to eat sweet foods, which in our evolutionary context, in the past, we may have meant a banana from a tree, but fruit wasn't so bad. But in the modern context of like ultra-processed food on every street corner, every supermarket is disastrous. So it's sort of like that. It's a mismatch between how we're wired and this weird modern context that this percentage of guys find themselves in. All right, let's cut to the chase. Why is it so bad? There's a number of reasons. Obviously, let's start with the women. You're hurting those women. Now, women are wired differently from men, no matter what the liberals say. They will catch feelings, as the kids say. You will destroy their chances of having meaningful relationships later in life. Okay? So most women there's research on this, it absolutely falls off it. And if they sleep with more than 8 or 10 men, it's just like they get to a point where it's very difficult for them to pair bond, to be happy with someone. That's also true of men, I believe, at a higher number than women. But you're certainly harming women in that sense, right? Even if it's consensual, even if society's told them they're a boss babe and to have fun, it's just not the case. It's just not the case. No matter how cautious I was with women, and to my now shame, I wasn't as cautious as I think I should have been. But even when I was very careful, it was friends, and it was, I still got the impression I was harming them emotionally. And some of the research, I think, backs that up. The key thing, though, also, if that doesn't motivate you, right, and as you get, like, you realize, like, you've got female friends, I've got a niece, you kind of people who have daughters, they go, I don't want to do that. They realize that. It also harms you and your soul. This is a really key thing. By treating other people as disposable objects, as sort of just sources of hedonistic pleasure, you're also harming yourself. You're objectifying others, which also means you objectify yourself. You treat other people as an object. You can't help but treat yourself as an object. You treat other people as a source of hedonistic, materialistic pleasure. This is what the mainstream culture promotes. Everyone from Andrew Tate to the sort of more feminist versions of this. This will harm you. This will absolutely harm you. And again, practically, it will make you just feel gross and icky, right? Also, long term, it can really damage that long-term pair bonding, which I think most of us do want in the end, to settle down, to have kids, to have a caring, loving relationship. It can really make that difficult. Certainly for me, it was difficult to, what I am now, settle down and sort of stop that behavior. There's an addictive tendency to it, like anything that gives you that dopamine here. You're reinforcing that pathway of kind of hedonistic pleasure, which also shows up in other areas of life, right? So this is bad for you psychologically, I would say spiritually too. So spiritually, you don't have to have actually pretty much every culture in human history, unless it was decaying into a period of sort of fall of Rome decadence, has limitations on sexuality. And for good reason, right? It's not just because condoms hadn't been invented or something like that. There was actually contraception in a lot of cultures, through various plants and things. But people realized it wasn't good for individuals, it wasn't good for society. And I think maybe all these cultures, all our ancestors weren't completely wrong. They realized there was something profound going on there. And you will feel that if you're in touch with yourself, if you're not just using sex as a numbing or as an addictive thing, which, I probably was. If you are in touch with yourself, you will feel it. Now, I remember what that was like. So I'd go on a rampage, I'd be in Moscow, and have 5 dates in 5 nights with 5 different girls. And they were nice girls, and it was all, consent orientated, and they were good looking, and they were, pleasant people, maybe lawyers, bankers, doctors. I, dated good women who spoke English. And even after that, I'd still feel kind of gross. And I don't think it's because I had some weird shaming voice in my head. I was raised very liberally, actually, around this. I was raised just respect women, have a nice time, use a condom. That's pretty much how I was raised by liberal parents. But I still had that grossed out feeling. I remember once I just phoned my lesbian friend. I was like, Julie, can I come out with you and the lesbians? I've had enough of being with the, go chasing girls. And it was like, I was longing for just some female company, maybe. And this is something else that's really important to differentiate in your own psychology is, what am I doing here? Like, is it that I'm just addicted to this very short-term feeling? Is it that I get some feeling of like status, like I'm the man if I can pull, I've been with so many girls. It's a very immature way to get status. Am I just distracting myself? I think, I was very stressed running a company, and I think it was a sort of a soothing mechanism. There's much better ways to relax out there. There's much better ways than that. What was I caught with? It's some sort of mummy issues I need to work through psychologically, some sort of trauma stuff. And as you heal, I've found, as you get older, as you heal, you realize like this wasn't healthy. All right, the other one to avoid, other reason to avoid it, the big one, this is the big one, is the damage that will be caused to you. Aside from the sort of spiritual damage, the psychological sense, the damage to women, women can be vicious, women can be crazy. Reputation is a thing for guys more than they realized. I definitely hurt my career with my behavior. Here's what I would consider. 1 in 4 statistically women has mental health issues. Liberal American women, it's about 50%, if that's the pool you're dating in, at any one time. Years ago, the figure was 1 in 4 in Britain in any year, but I think it's actually more than that now. You are rolling a dice, and every time you're with a woman that she can ruin your life. This is a key thing to understand. I remember sitting around with a group of colleagues, and they're all nice people, and I said, just out of interest, how would you ruin my life if you wanted to? And went around the room, we're sitting in the staff room, And all of them told me away. So I'd get my brother to do this, beat you up, I'd spread this rumor about you, I'd ruin your work this way. And these were nice women. So I was like, whoa, that opened my eyes, you know? Also, I just had enough instances with people. And some of it was like proper mental health problems. There was one girl, for example, who just lied about me. And there's this guy who's really annoyed me, and I kept bumping into him. I said, why are you so angry towards me? And eventually I said, look, this girl said this. And I was like, I definitely didn't do that. Like, it was just a pure lie. And I think because of her mental health issues. Other people may lie because they're malicious, right? Some people are crazy. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I think men tremendously underestimate how much harm women can do. They are skilled socially in a way which is like we're bringing a knife to a gunfight socially with women. They can do reputation damage, group attack, insinuation. There's like a whole bunch of things women can do that I think men are tremendously unaware of. The other thing is there's a grey area here. So even if you're trying to be consent conscious, as I always was, I know I didn't do anything illegal. I think I did do things that were immoral. I did things that were unpleasant, that I regret. I did do things that were a bit unethical, sort of like slightly manipulative or not necessarily directly lying to women, but not being totally honest. It's the problem with anything that becomes an addiction is your ethics lower, right? Your integrity lowers. You find this with like a drug addict. I'm in long-term sobriety for drugs and alcohol, like many years now. And a junkie will like steal your wallet, then feel bad about it, then help you look for the wallet. But it's like, that's the horror of being any kind of addict is your ethical standard will lower. Yeah, so one, there's a genuine risk your ethical standard will lower. So assuming you're not a psychopath, assuming you're not a sort of evil criminal type who really hurts women, I think most men are pretty good men, but sexuality can make us just a little bit less well-behaved, a little bit pushy, a little bit manipulative, a little bit something that's just not quite ethical. And I was certainly in that area. I feel ashamed of it now. As simple as that. It was below the moral standard that I had then, and definitely that I have now. I wasn't living according to my full integrity. So that grey area exists, and also psychologically there's a grey area. Like, women will say yes, but they're very agreeable. Maybe they have trauma, and then later on go, well, I was meaning no, right? Or I regret it. So they're confusing regret with consent. That is dangerous. That is dangerous for everyone involved, and you are rolling that dice every time you're with a woman. You're rolling the dice that she'll spread a rumor, that she'll be unhappy, that she'll simply regret her decisions, that she'll feel pressured even if you're not applying pressure. People don't understand this. Like, women often have very bad boundaries. I've coached a lot of people to say no and to have better boundaries. And as I've coached more and more women, I became more and more aware, like, shit, most women just aren't able to say no. They can even look really convincing when they're like, I'm having a nice time, blah, blah. And I'd always be surprised when, I give you a sort of light example. I'd meet a woman, maybe in the supermarket, right? I got quite good at just randomly chatting to people, sort of Irish skill. Get a number, and then I could see it was her number because it would come up blue, as an iPhone. It always shows that it's the real number. And I text out, it was lovely to meet you, seemed really friendly at the time. We talked about going out. Would you like to meet for coffee or dinner sometime, right? And I'd say about 50% of the time, women didn't text back. And it was clear it was their number. So they had actually given the number. In that moment, they seemed very happy. They seemed very, very willing to meet up, smiles, everything. I'm pretty good at reading people as well. It's part of my job as a coach. So if I'm making this mistake, other people definitely are. And then half of them just wouldn't. And I go, what's up with that? And I go, oh, they felt a little bit of pressure, or they felt scared even though I wasn't doing anything, or they were just trying to get rid of me and they were uncomfortable. And that wasn't obvious to me. And I say this as someone who's not autistic, who's relatively skilled at reading people. It's a big part of my job. I think a lot of guys aren't. A lot of guys have got worse skills than me with those kind of areas. So you're going to be clumsy. You're going to be making mistakes. It's almost like a sort of definition of harassment. It's like when a man comes onto a woman and she doesn't want it, right? I think it's also not accepting no for an answer. But the tricky thing as a guy is that you realize that sometimes women say no and mean yes, and they say no and then change their mind. And you gotta be so careful. I mean, it got to the point with me that I'd almost want it in writing from someone, right? Like text someone, do you want to have sex with me kind of thing. And it's like, there's so many gray areas. There's so many areas that can go wrong. And you're just rolling the dice on that. And one, you could be accused of something criminal. Even if it doesn't stick, you could still absolutely ruin your reputation. Two, what I found was that just being whorish, just being a man-ho, people talked. Women talk. Gossip's a thing. And I sort of not get an invite somewhere, right? Like, I don't know, there's a festival that I taught at, and I hadn't harassed any of my students, but maybe I'd sort of flirted with a few people on the side. They made a little quiet complaint to the organisers, and I just wouldn't get invited back. You know, sometimes I'd hear about it, and I'd say, but I haven't done anything wrong, you know, and I hadn't done anything illegal, but I'd flirted with someone and they'd not enjoyed it, right? And maybe there was 3 other women who did enjoy it. Maybe there was 10 other women who enjoyed it, but it only takes that one, yeah? And you're doing a numbers game here. So I think there's a degree of risk that most men don't realise. You'll also damage your reputation with other good men. You know, I remember other good men saying, I'm not sure if I want to work with you. I've just heard a few things. There's no smoke without fire. And other good men will be cautious to work with you, I'd say, as well. And so bear in mind, you know, I've been pretty impeccable with my students and my ethics professionally over the years. But there's things around that, you know, things that are not necessarily your students, but in some situation, it wasn't necessarily colleagues. It's grey areas. People have emotions. Emotions cause trouble. And we are playing with fire. A fire that's meant to warm our homes, yes, it can be a positive thing, so it's a good analogy, but can really cause problems. Okay, what kind of other problems? Obviously, pregnancy is a big one, right? There's no such thing as totally safe sex. I've had broken condoms before, for example. Absolutely loads of scares with that over the 20 years. But I'm not going to give you my exact numbers. I don't know them. It's gross to say. What I would say is this, though, like, just think about how many women you could sleep with if you worked out had to sleep with 1 woman a week. And that's totally doable in a big city using the apps and stuff. Like, if you figure that out over 20 years, let's say you started at 16, by the time you were 36 and ready to settle down, that's 1,000. Like, you are really taking some risks there, just numbers games wise. Yeah, at that point, like, my God, okay, there's things I won't tell you, but it's, you know, certainly pregnancy is definitely a risk. Do you want to have like 3 or 4 different baby mamas paying them like most of your money for the rest of your life? Like people raising your kids who aren't good people? I'd say your minimum standard for dating, and this is a good thing to think about if you're trying to avoid being a manho, is would I be okay with this person raising my kids? Actually, my last lover, before I sort of settled down, was someone who was a friend and is a good person. They're a single mum and a good mum. And I kind of looked at them and I went, you know what, if we did have an accident, I'd be kind of okay with you raising my child, right? Like, not an ideal situation, because I probably wouldn't be present. And you are linked to that person forever. It's, in a way, it's like the real marriage now in modernity, I think, right? Because you can't be undadding even if you're absent. You're linked to that person mentally, physically, probably financially forever. But that should be your minimum standard. And I definitely would be people like, God, I wouldn't trust this person to raise children, let alone my children. Yeah, so I think that's a minimum standard. The other way it can go, of course, is abortions. And I'm not going to overshare here, but you do not want that connected to you spiritually. Whether you're, you don't have to be Catholic or whatever, but, you know, that is something you do not want on your soul. It will weigh. I've coached a bunch of women who have had abortions, and to do that to someone, not okay. If they have any sort of spiritual beliefs, if they're not totally brainwashed by sort of feminist postmodernity. Most women aren't. Most women are very caring. They care for kids, including unborn kids. And that is a scar that stays with them forever. It stays with them forever. And it's certainly a scar on the human soul. It's a heaviness on the human soul. It's something you may one day have to answer for. And I think it doesn't go away. That is something you don't want to be involved with. And as I said, there's no such thing as safe sex. You are playing a numbers game. Condoms break. The pill sometimes doesn't work. You know, definitely like women who do it by their cycles and stuff. There are risks there. So I'd say that is one to be very cautious of, because whether it's pregnancy or abortion, there's just huge costs there, huge costs. STIs, I think it's often overstated, actually, modernity, but, you know, HIV is a thing. I'm pretty lucky I didn't get it with all the man-hurrying I did in Russia. Certain areas and certain types of things are worse risks. It's worth knowing about. I was pretty good on using condoms, but again, they break. I had scares, man. I had broken condoms with people who I knew were promiscuous. And then, like, you have to wait like 3 months to get like a test to make sure, because it takes at least 3 months to show up HIV. And those 3 months I was anxious, man. Like the amount of warning shots I had. I remember once I went to a clinic in Brighton where I lived, and they said to me, like, are we going to do these tests on you? And I didn't have any symptoms. So I thought, well, if I've got anything, it's HIV. And yeah, it turns out they basically said, we won't call you unless there's a problem. All right. I got a missed call from them later that day after having the slightly uncomfortable test, which is never much fun. And I thought, oh my God, I got AIDS. You know, I spent the whole weekend worrying about it. How am I going to tell my partner? Blah, blah, blah. Turns out they just missed some admin, like date of birth was missing on the system or something. But I spent the whole weekend stressing about that, man. And it was like, I had so many instances like that. It's like God gives you warning shots, man. I had so many warning shots. And then I found that consequences get worse. You'll see that with any addiction. I remember my first colleague decided to stop working with me because he'd heard some rumors, and they might have been total lies. I might have been totally in the wrong, or probably something like in the middle, if I'm honest. And, you know, I love that guy. You know, he was a great colleague, and that was one of the first things that really went wrong. I would still love to work with that guy. And it was like, he was a sensitive guy and had his issues as well, but it's on me. You got to take responsibility here. Take responsibility. Don't complain if your man whoring causes problems. And that was the first. And there was a few others, you know. There was a journalist who tried to cancel me and come after me. And turned out she didn't have enough material, and it was like people just told her to bugger off when she dug around and said, no, this was all consensual. But she was looking to get me cancelled, I think, for political reasons. That was terrifying. Definitely had non-invites to places that I was like, but yeah, I haven't done anything wrong. And it was like, yeah, but you've been careless. I remember my therapist saying to me once, he said, you didn't really do anything wrong, but what you did was stupid and not wise. I was like, yeah, fair enough. And, you know, one of the last ones I had was actually a death threat. It was... I won't say where because there's sensitivities involved, but let's just say I slept with someone I probably shouldn't have done. Again, young woman, well above the age of consent, of course. I think it was 19, all consensual, but way younger than me, and her family were very influential, powerful people, and they were pissed about it. Even though she was cool with it, they were pissed, and because of the circumstances, they basically just gave me a pretty strong death threat that I did take seriously. And I was like, okay, this could have ended badly. So many times in Russia, if the police had got involved, even if I hadn't done anything, it would have, you know, it could have ended. Man, imagine being in a Russian jail. Yeah, all sorts of things that could have been way worse. And I feel like in some ways I got away lightly with the promiscuity that I had. Though certainly it's left its cost on me spiritually, psychologically, in terms of the impact on the relationship I now have. You know, I've now come to the conclusion that if it's not in marriage, then it should at least be in the container of a committed, loving relationship. Like, that is just a basic thing. If you're having sex outside of that, it's going to cause problems. The standard societal thing of consent is not enough. It's all just a sport. It's all just fun and games. No, absolutely not true. I'd also say, like, in the age of social media, you know, reputations last a long time. Being a man today is like being a woman in the 1950s. You know, if you get a bad rep, you know, even though my behavior's been very good the last few years, I'm sure I've still got a bad rep in some circles. These things take a long, long time. One more thing I just say is the energy drain from it. You know, if I think of the time and energy I spent chasing girls, you know, like when I was working in Kiev or Moscow, I'd have like a date almost every night. I think, God, I could have learned a language. I could have been deeper in my hobbies. Like the distraction from me, you know. There was definitely times when it was affecting my work. I was tired. I was just spending way too much time on it. I remember, you know, a Russian colleague of mine just saying, Mark, you were on Tinder a lot. You had many dates. In Russia, nobody will judge you as a successful man to be with beautiful women, but does not look good for business. You know, looks cheap. Maybe don't do it. Again, these warning shots, right? This was someone who cared for me, who was not judging me. I think what's really hard here is a lot of the people that will judge you are just jealous, or they're women trying to protect the dating market from younger. They're trying to, this is sort of, Homath talks about this, there's a kind of competitive thing where older, less attractive women will try and cock block younger, attractive women. Yeah, obviously the feminists have got a very anti-male narrative around this. They don't like male sexuality at all. They don't like the idea of men being sort of sexually interested in women. They don't like the idea of successful men in particularly. And there's just jealous people. You know, there's definitely like guys who can't get laid who are jealous, women who are past their prime who are jealous, who don't want to admit that. So it's a lot of the advice you're getting to slow it down comes from people who are unpleasant, feminist, jealous, got political agendas, anti-male. And I ignored it for those reasons. but I ignored a lot of that input. I remember someone saying, Mark, you're getting older now, it's gross. And I was like, oh, shut up, what's to say? And actually, she was right. She was right. I think one of the things we should do is sex shame each other a lot more, slut shame each other a lot more as men. I think this is really key, to have a group of men around you who will say, not cool, not big, not clever. You think you're the man. Actually, it's very childish, boyish behavior. It's not manly behavior. It's very childish. It does harm, particularly when it starts risking your work, right? Like, I've always loved my work. I've always loved the work I do with embodiment and coaching. And it was definitely a risk for that. Like, it was so many times I saw that and didn't do anything about it, which, if you really love your work, if you've really got a strong sense of purpose, is unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable. And I think I did know that I was harming women there as well. Again, nothing illegal, but I know I was just being a bit snide. They'd call it in Manchester, a bit underhand, sleeping with people in a way that their feelings will, of course, get involved. What did I expect to happen? It's also things you don't know, like, you can transmit STIs without having them. As a man, for example, there's various types of viruses that can give various illnesses to women, stop them having kids, that you might not even show up on yourself. They might not even be tests. Some of them it's not, like certain HPVs and things, it's not tests for. I learned this, I didn't know about a lot of this stuff. So there's the emotional, the spiritual side, the pregnancy side. This is not a thing you want to be doing to other people. All right, so what practically to do about it? This video is like how not to sleep with a harassed woman, how not to be a hoe, right? I think the first thing is really getting this, is really getting a lot of the costs that are potentially involved, which I think I didn't get, I belittled, I ignored. I think not buying into the mainstream narrative of materialistic hedonism, like having some bigger spiritual system. It could be like Theravada Buddhism, could be Catholicism, there's different systems out there, but having some bigger system that has ethics around sex, which has limitations beyond just consent, because that is not enough and it is impossible to apply in a way that does no harm to you or creates no risk to yourself or others. It's just impossible. So that's my conclusion. So yeah, I would say like that is key, is having some bigger system, brotherhood around you. I think I've mentioned this before with slut shaming, having guys around you who don't think it's cool and clever. I remember like one of my Aikido teachers, I was like, yeah, I've got another date tonight. And he just looked at me like, okay. He didn't want to talk about it. And I picked up like, okay, he's not cool with this. He's a Christian guy and he was not really cool with it. But I would have loved it if he'd have took me aside and said, Mark, I know you're a young guy. I know you're horny. That's perfectly natural, God-given instinct. Maybe calm it down a bit, boy, all right? I would have loved it if it had said that. I needed that message from guys, because I ignored it when it was from women or sort of loser guys. That's why I'm making this video, right? It's part of my amends, they call it, in 12-step. I want young guys to hear this and not make the mistakes that I've made that could have ended way worse. It's been bad, if I'm honest. There's been real issues, real problems, but it could have been way worse. I really hope you learn from this. I just feel like there's people that have to learn the hard way like me, and there's smarter fucking people. I hope you're one of those people. So listen to people like me who have been there. They're recovering fuckboys. They're now older. They're a bit wiser. I should have learned way before the age I am now. But as I said, now it's been a few years. I'm sort of like, okay, I feel ready to make a video on this and say with integrity, don't do this. Other things you can do practically. When you start dating, be really clear. I don't sleep around, but that will actually make you more attractive to women, particularly the right kind of women. The kind of women who are really looking for a serious partner, like good women, they will not be attracted to a fuckboy. They might have a bit of fun with them while they're young, but they're going to discard you, right? In the same way as, men who can be players will discard women when they're, for that. They'll actually maybe play around when you're young. The really good ones are just not even going to look at you because you'll be gross to them. Women do judge body count as well. I remember telling one girlfriend what I thought was my body count, and she was just repulsed, She was just like, what is wrong with you, you monster? And this isn't a humble brag, like I'm genuinely ashamed of it now. So be really clear with people, this is what I date for, right? Tell people that I date I'm dating a few girls. Some people it's no sex before marriage. Some people it's like, well, I do have sex, but only after a certain amount of dating if there's long-term commitment. Let that be your reputation. Then people will hold you to it. Be as simple as that, right? Next one, I say just avoid environments where there's huge temptation. Delete the apps off your phone. Just delete them. They are a temptation. They are a dopamine addictive thing. Nightclubs, terrible places. Don't go to them. Certain kinds of the sort of hippie versions of this too, like certain kind of tantra events and stuff. Just avoid them. Yeah, avoid those environments, particularly if there's alcohol involved, which is going to lower your inhibitions at the same time. Do not spend time in places like that. Pick your friends wisely. Pick friends who are going to hold you accountable, who aren't also fuckboys. Make it not normal in your social environment. I'd say the more you practice other kinds of self-restraint, the better too. So, you know, what really helped me was I was going to get cold showers and fasting. I'd always done martial arts, but I think something where you're restraining yourself, right? Not just dealing with fight or flight, but dealing with what the Buddhists would call grasping, tanha, it's called in Pali. So if you can practice those sort of things, as you know, traditional religions do, Orthodox Christians are fasting half the year, same with Ethiopian Christians, it just becomes sort of normal to restrain yourself, right? It becomes part of your life. So then when it comes up sexually, it's just not a big deal. Obviously, watch your media diet. You know, I don't like it now when I see adverts like women in bikinis and underwear big on the streets, you know. I just immediately unfollow anyone on Instagram who's showing their titties, you know, girls who are sort of flaunting themselves like that, just unfollow them. Any guys who are encouraging that, you know, me with all the girls on the yacht, just unfollow those people. Don't watch those videos. Like, just treat that like with contempt. Treat it like just like these childish people. And there is a real dignity when you first start saying no to women. I remember when I did, there was one woman who was furious with me because it happened so little to women. But when you learn to not simp, to say no to women, to not be fooled by them, to not be manipulated by their sexual charms, and we really shouldn't encourage women to do this, right? Women who manipulate with their sexuality is like men who are violent. You know, they're misusing a power that they have. Like most men can beat up most women, but we don't. Most women can seduce most men and get free shit from them, and a lot do, sadly. So we shouldn't tolerate that. And when you do stand up to that, it feels so good. It feels this feeling of freedom. So enjoy that feeling. Like define success in terms of having pride in that. Yeah, define like it's like I've seen some good memes about this lately. I think the bro community is waking up. Like success is defined as not being a simp. Success is defined as not being so easily manipulated. Like there's a freedom to going, you're attractive, but you know what? I've got better things to do. That brings us on to the sense of life purpose. You know, for me, it wasn't quite enough, but I don't think I quite made that link. Make the link between wasting your energy, getting these risks, reputation damage, make that link to what you're doing in the world. And it is hard for men to resist hedonism of all kinds, you know, until they have a strong sense of life purpose. Look at my book's got a bunch of content on this. Look it up, Feral Philosophy, How to Become Human. Look up the book, it's linked probably in the video. Anyway, so getting a clear sense of purpose, I think linking the dangers around sexuality to that really help. And I think lastly here is just treating yourself with respect, treating other people with respect, understanding that you objectify people at your own peril, that it's a form of violence to do that, that it's gross. Really getting that, you know, you are hurting women and you are hurting yourself with this behavior. Don't believe me, right? I hope that you will listen and go, right, maybe there's something to be learned here from this. This guy has been through a bunch of stuff and learned the hard way too fucking slow, to my shame. I hope you learn from that and don't make some of these mistakes. But all I'd ask you to do is just notice, like, how do you feel after a one-night stand? How do you feel after hooking up with a rando? You feel gross, right? Like really feel into it. Is this something, and ask yourself, like, if you're sleeping with a rando, like, would I want this for my daughter? Would I want this for, you know, my best female friend? I've always had a lot of good female friends, and it was one of the things that woke me up as I went, I think men are mistreating them, and then it's harming them. And I go, oh God, I am those men for other women, you know? So, yeah, that is one to really just feel into, you know, pray on it if you pray, meditate on it if you meditate, find a tradition, find brotherhood. These are some of the things you can do. And again, I wasn't boasting in this video, I genuinely regret how I lived for many years. I think I was immature, I was harmful, and I hope you fucking wake up quicker than I did.